Right, so we've got a bit of a long overdue video here. I've had a new set of powder coated, remanufactured calipers to go on the front for, bloody hell, must be 6 months. And these calipers, I don't know if you can see much, the light's not great. They're pretty much toast, and when I say toast, I mean because of the track days I've done when I first got the car. The rubber seals are knackered, and yeah, basically they need a good rebuild. The brakes work alright, but I brought these calipers, so I might as well fit them. So I'll show you a few bits, a few tips on what I recommend to do to make the job a bit easier. Firstly, I would say get your key once you've got the car off the ground and get the wheel turned. In this case I'm on the passenger side one, and get the wheel turned outwards so the caliper comes out this way. Just gives you a bit more access. So yeah, literally 30 seconds into the job, getting the locking wheel nut key out the boot, I managed to catch one nail on an edge, and yeah, I've pretty much split it. That's going to be great. So with the wheel off, you can see the caliper, and basically I'll point out what we've got to do. You can see there, actually that boot is looking a bit, up there is looking a bit squashed, so that bolt there's got to come out. This one down here's got to come out. We've got to undo this banjo bolt, and that's the point where you're going to start getting brake fluid leaking out. And while you're here, it makes sense to just check the brake disc. So you're checking for grooves. This disc has got hardly any wear on it, and just a quick look for marks. I mean, there's a bit of a groove there, to be honest, or mark, but that doesn't overly worry me. Inspect the brake line, which to me all looks pretty good. These were hell ones. And while we're here, we can have a look at the Bilstons. They still look good, as they should do. I've not really done many miles. So another tip while I'm here is when doing calipers, trick that I learnt on Hondas, if you wedge the brake pedal halfway down, then when you disconnect the lines, or for any like brake line work, caliper work, disconnecting the lines, if you have the pedal halfway down, it will stop the brake fluid from coming out. Obviously this case I'm literally going to be taking the caliper off and putting a new one straight on, so there's going to be no hanging around. But if you're just going to leave it overnight, for example, then that's a method you can use. Right, hopefully you can see there the piston boot, and the piston itself, you can see it's quite pitted. I don't know if it's actually wet. I mean, I don't lose any brake fluid. Maybe it weeps a tiny bit. So as you can see, that needs looking at, needs replacing, and that's the main reason why the caliper's coming off. Pads there I've got are ceramic from the United States. I've got them cheap from Rock Auto. There's actually a lot of pad material left, but I'm pretty sure I've got some Honda ones on the shelf, and the Honda is pretty much the same cost as the pattern part, so to me it just makes sense to put the Honda ones on. They provided plenty of stopping power on a standard car. I know mine's supercharged, but you're not always pushing on. But with the kit that I've got with the caliper, the whole caliper bracket and all of this hardware all comes off, so makes my job easier. And the caliper bracket's actually powder coated as well. So right, so that's the caliper itself. I think that looks pretty decent. All new rubber seals, looks like a new piston. Should look good on the car. Just check that I've got it the right way up with the bleed nipple. This is powder coated, so this should be hard wearing, shouldn't chip, be resistant to brake fluid. So we'll get it up, see how it looks. only problem with it is it's going to look really shiny and the rest of the car's going to look dirty. Never mind. Something I've never noticed before when I fitted other pads is that it's got two shims, it appears, that go on the back of the pad. So you can see the stainless one, and then you've got the normal like noise damper one. I can only think that the stainless one is possibly there for heat reasons, maybe to prevent excessive heat going on the piston. Not 100% sure, but that is something new. I've not seen that. Just have a quick look. Caliper bracket is on with hardware, slightly different from the S2000 bracket, but when I say different, the pad mounts, everything's the same apart from these edges, which are less curved. They're more straight. So from what I've seen online, the Civic Type R also uses the same style of bracket, so possibly that's what's happened here. I don't know if I already mentioned it on the video. These calipers I bought from the States for £150. That was all in, including shipping and tax paid via eBay. Great deal, especially when you think what you get for it. Over in the UK, you're not going to get anything like that for that price. So I'll get these pads fitted and we'll carry on. So that's the caliper mounted. As you can see, pretty sturdy. Pads not going anywhere. I've chosen to not actually lubricate the pads this time, because obviously that'll make a bit of a mess of the caliper. But probably where it's been shot blasted or sandblasted prior to paint has made these clearances quite loose. So there's still plenty of movement in the pad. So I've got no worries that the pad is going to bind. That's the sort of thing when you're changing brake pads on any car. The pad should be firm in the bracket, but it shouldn't be tight. What you find with a lot of blueprint parts is that it'll rub here, or it'll rub on the ears. Sometimes you have to file it a bit, but obviously these are Honda pads. I've got the part number here. Honda pads, so they all fit perfectly, as you'd expect, to be honest. So yeah, I've not had to file these or touch them, just fit the backing pads they supply, and that's done. So next thing to do is to get this undone and quickly swap it over with minimal fuss, which should be relatively straightforward. I might just have to use an impact gun to undo it. Probably should have cracked it undone with the caliper mounted in place, because it'd make it easier later on, but you know, sometimes you don't do things in the order that you should do. Right, so it's all piped up on. It was a bit more of a faff than I wanted it to be. The main reason being, it appears that the hole that was in the caliper for the banjo bolt was a bit, thread was a bit grubby, so trying to get the bolt started, it wouldn't start. So I ended up taking the bolt out of the banjo fitting and screwing it in on its own, and that seemed to do the job. Everything's bolted up. I just need to bleed it for what you need to do the job. 14mm spanner socket, 17mm socket spanner. You've got your bleed nipple, which I'm pretty sure is a 10mm. So all I've got to do now is bleed the brake fluid, and what I'll do is I'll include this in the video, just give you an idea of why I think a vacuum bleeder is the best way of doing it. And what we're going to use for brake fluid is just this brake and clutch fluid from Coma. So nothing special. It has got super blue in it at the moment, but to be honest, that's not warranted. And with the super blue, you tend to it tends to absorb moisture more than the normal stuff. So yeah, I'll get the vacuum bleeder hooked up to the compressor, fill up the reservoir, and what I'll also do is give the brake pedal a couple of pumps now, just to force any potential air towards the caliper
rather than it stay in the line. So I'll do that now, and it should just save me a bit of time when it comes to bleeding. Right, so forgive me for the noise, but that is the vacuum bleeder connected up. And as you can see, it's filling up with brake fluid, connected to my compressor, quite a silent one. We'll take a wander over to the tank. As you can see, fluid's going down, so all I've got to do is keep topping it up. So I better pause this video so I don't end up with with air getting sucked in. But yeah, that's the basic premise to a vacuum bleed. Compressor generates pressurised air, then goes into the vacuum bleeder, which creates a Venturi effect, I think, which then pulls a vacuum, and then you end up with the brake fluid getting pulled through the system. So I'm going to give this another top up and then carry on pulling it through. Right, so now we've done that, I've bled the brakes. I've put about 250 millilitres through, which is quite a lot, but I've also pumped the brake pedal just to make sure that there's no, I'll get it to focus, that there's no leaks around the banjo bolt, and it all looks good now. Brake pedal feels pretty decent, no signs of any leaks. One thing that you get with people who use vacuum bleeders or say they're no good is that when you're bleeding you end up with air constantly coming through the nipple, and sometimes that air is getting sucked from behind these threads. Obviously when you undo the bleed nipple you sort of expose it to the air a bit. Now that doesn't matter, because as long as there's a vacuum getting pulled on this nipple, it'll pull a bit of air through here, but majority of it will be brake fluid getting pulled through the system. So as long as you still have it under vacuum when you shut this, you'll have no chance of any air getting trapped inside it. So that's a bit of a myth, I think, with vacuum bleeders. They go, oh, you're always getting air through. That doesn't matter. It's not the quantity of brake fluid I've pulled through, 250 millilitres, you can see it there, is much easier and much quicker than doing it the two-man method, in my opinion. And you do get better results because it's constant. The vacuum is there constant, trying to force it through and pulling the air through as well. But I've pressed the brake pedal a few times just to compress it all, and I might just give it another quick pull through with a bleeder just to get rid of any residual air, and possibly maybe in the future I might have to bleed it again. But I thought it's worth just going over that, just to clarify why I think vacuum bleeders the best method. Right, so that's the wheel back on. Caliper can be seen there. I think that looks pretty decent, to be honest. Now have a listen to this. Hopefully you can hear that. So what that is the pads just binding slightly on the disc where there might be like a high spot, and typically the high spot would probably be, get my hand out of the way, high spot would probably be at the top of the disc, the edge. So what will happen is when I first apply the brakes, the pad is only really going to be contacting that part of the disc until it wears down, but it'll wear down quite quick because obviously that's a lot of force being pushed on one section. Now, or it could also be that the disc is slightly out of run out, but that's not really a massive problem. All I'd have to make sure is that the caliper is not actually binding, which, to be honest, it is stopping it slowly, but it's not a massive issue, it's just barely catching it. So the way to avoid that, quite simply, is put a new disc on with new pads, and then it would sit flush perfectly, because you've got two perfectly flat surfaces, whereas at the moment you've got surface here that is high, probably loads of load, and high there, and the pad only has to touch that bit there, and it's gonna make that noise. So after a bit of wearing in, they should be fine. And like I said, I like the caliper. I think it looks good. It looks quite good with a Honda backing plate. Forgive me for the state of my wheels, but I'm not really interested in what it looks like Main reason I fitted this was because I had them in the garage, thought I might as well get them done. I'm now going to bleed the back corners and do the other side's caliper. You don't need to see that, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll try and put out some more content. If there's anything in particular you want to see, then let me know, and I'll do my best to film it and give you some information as to how to make it go easier. Thanks for watching.